we find ourselves joined by our very first What the X illustrious guest. And with me this evening, I have the fabulous Catriona Grant.
Oh, hiya, Bob. Here we are.
Brilliant. Right, listen, Catriona, first of all, thanks for jumping in here at such short notice. I had hoped to do this live so that our regular What the X attendees could have fired some questions directly at you.
I'm sorry I couldn't do that, but I did swing by on my way to my next thing, so...
What's next?
Oh, I'm going out with my tea.
Right, well, I won't keep you too long, but the reason that I wanted to talk to you today was because there was it's a kind of emergency, an emergency What the X cast here, X-cast, and it's basically in light of the cuts that the council have announced. I think they announced them on Friday evening. Was that right?
I think so. And then the document has come out recently, so yeah, it's quite brutal.
The last bit of business at the end of the day was they announced about £5 million worth of cuts that are about to come out.
Yep.
So I'm just going to read the article that Donald Turvill wrote, and then you can maybe elaborate a little bit on what you know about this. Right. So Donald Turvill published this. He might have published this today, actually, and it's Edinburgh cuts to support of vulnerable people, why they're happening, and what they'll mean. The Edinburgh Integration Joint Board, EGIB, which oversees the city's health and social care services, is set to slash £4.5 million of grants, currently shared between 64 organisations. The funding supports organisations carrying out preventative and early intervention work with vulnerable residents, including dementia sufferers, disabled young people, rape victims, those on low incomes, and new parents. The grant funding was expected to continue until at least March next year, with the possibility of a further extension. However, health and social care chiefs are proposing to bring this forward to the end of January in a bid to reduce a significant financial deficit, giving charities just 90 days to find alternative funding and threatening the future viability of many projects. Charities set to have their grant cut have said the decision would cost city authorities more in the long term and risk axing the only support accessed by some of the cities most in need. One compared it to a sinking ship deciding it needs to be lighter and cutting its life rafts, adding they felt devalued by the proposals. Outgoing EIJB Chief Officer Pat Toffer said in a report the organisation, a partnership between Edinburgh Council and NHS Lothian, was at risk of being unable to meet its fundamental responsibilities. In March, a budget gap of £60 million was reported, and despite achieving substantial savings since then, significant shortfalls remain. And with a further £50 million in cuts needed to balance the books in 2025-26, Mr Toffer said the gaps will not be closed through efficiency savings or improved grip on control alone, and cash currently invested in the grants programme would be better spent in other priorities. I just wanted to scan down to the Ripple, which was at Loch End. There was Portobello Monday Centre was one of the other ones that had reported saying that their group activities such as singing and a hot lunch and the opportunity for members to, I think a lot of members got dementia, that would be immediately under threat. And Rachel Green, director of the Ripple project, which works to tackle poverty and inequality in Wrestlebridge, Loch End and Craigentinny, told the LDRS that we heard we were going to get an extension for the year, which would give us 15 months to try and plug this. She said, well, the charity's annual funding from the EGIB was £87,000. The cut would lead to a disinvestment in the area of £500,000, as the grant enables me and other people to lever in other funds.
Yep.
Right, there's various articles that have appeared about this. Give me your assessment of what's actually happened here with these cuts that are being brought in.
This is dystopian. This is absolutely mental. So what this means is people are talking about early intervention and prevention and vulnerable people. This is the funding that gets to communities. This is your community centres. This is the projects where your grandma might go to a lunch club, where young people who have children get to meet other people, the mum and toddlers groups. This is if I use some of these services, so if you need to apply for benefits, and some of the benefit system is quite complicated, you need somebody who's specialist and can give you good advice. All community projects funded through health and social care is going to be disinvested. And the reason why they've given 90 days is so that the community groups can basically give out redundancy notices. That's legal. So I'm sure if they could have done it within 30 days, they would have, but by legally they have to in their contracts 90 days. So they can give out mass redundancy notices without them taking responsibility for that. If you read the paper, the document, there's something in there that says, we support early intervention prevention, but we're going to disinvest from it, but we still support the values of early intervention prevention. But let's be clear, what's actually been suggested here is disinvesting into the community, closing all those projects down, and some of them will continue because they'll be grant funded from other trusts and other grant making bodies and things like that. So it won't be completely closed down all at once, but there'll be massive cuts, you call them savings, disinvestment. But what will happen is maybe somebody who's got dementia might not be getting out the house, so that they might become more and more vulnerable in their house, and then they will need statutory intervention, and then basically the state, the local authority, will then intervene. So what they're suggesting is we will provide, if it's critical or substantial, i.e. you can get state intervention, but we won't do anything to stop the state getting involved in your life. So that, for me, is as dystopian as it gets. The Tories have never put this forward before. This comes under a label Labour administration. And if you look at the document again, they have like false numbers, like everything that the local authority, the partnership does seems to save them money, but what happens in the community doesn't have any value at all. So the economics, if an economist was to look at this, they would ask questions about it. And this is devastating. So it also means if there's a cut from the council, it means there won't be the workforce or the workers to be able to apply to the other agencies to get the money in. But there's a big problem if we only rely in the communities on trusts and philanthropists and all that to fund. It means there's no democratic control. I would argue there isn't anyway, but there's no democracy involved. So it just means whatever a grant funder or a philanthropist wants to support, they get to do that. And there's no connection back to the community or the local authority. So just now we could lobby, like we've done with People's Story, unsuccessfully so far, we could go to the council, you cut this isn't fair. But now the council, that gets removed if they remove all this funding. So there's nobody to lobby, there's nobody to deputise to, and it means you're failing as a community because you can't bring in the resources from somewhere else, and I don't know how communities can do that. So I think this is the most dystopian document I have ever read, and I've been a social worker for 30 years and I worked in local authority and wrote policies and things like that, and I've never seen anything like this in my life.
Yeah, I'm glad you just clarified actually who you are there, because
yeah, I'm not just a random. Well, I'm a bit random, but no, I speak with authority on this.
Absolutely, and my enthusiasm to talk with you at short notice, I had forgotten to actually ask you to tell us who you were. But no, you've got a lot of skin in this game. You've got a lot of knowledge of how it goes on and how things have evolved over the years. Who actually was responsible for creating the report?
It's seemingly from the chief executive, whose name I can't remember. I think you said his name. He came from Glasgow and he's only been here 10 months and he's skipping off again, and he's just put off a big bomb. Whether it was him that wrote that, I don't know, but he's just let off a massive bomb in the council, in the partnership between health and social care, and just is leaving us. So, make of that what you will.
Why do you think that it's that we've got to this stage where something as devastating like this can just be unrolled without much challenge, or with where you expect that they don't really expect to face much challenge from it.
No, they don't. They expect a lobby outside the city chambers like we're going to have on Friday, and expect all that. They expect the evening news to say something. They expect there to be a couple of outraged councillors and a few really upset MSPs. But they know there won't be a great pushback. People will be upset by it, but who's going to organise people to fight back against cuts like this? You know, this is devastating. But it's also within the, you know, the politics of the area. What has happened just now in Edinburgh, you know, it is a case of, you know, for quoting the knickers, we are going to have cycle paths that'll take you nowhere. We're going to have lovely wide boulevards. No, they have said they're not going to put trees in George Street. So they're going to completely change the public realm of Edinburgh without any say from the you know, the citizens of Edinburgh, and then devastate the local communities. So it comes from, they have an ideology, they have a political plan for Edinburgh, and be clear about it, Bob, we're not part of that plan.
No, definitely not. We're not part of it. There is a sense, though, that I feel that the city itself is ill-informed on these matters.
Absolutely.
And I think that they like it like that. I think they're perfectly aware that when they attack, especially our poorest communities in this form, there's a sense of, you know, there's nowhere for that frustration and anger to be coalesced and focused, because, you know, aside from the good local reporter that we have, Donald Turvill, and a few other people here and there, we really have a dearth of actual communication throughout the city in terms of what's actually occurring.
I mean, we don't have, you make this point, we don't have, you know, media in Edinburgh. We don't have anything, we don't even have local papers, we don't even have the Herald and Post anymore, do you know what I mean? Or the West Hill Sentinel, or all those type of papers, they don't exist anymore. And moving to like having 3 councillors in a bigger ward means, you know, that's almost become a political game for the political parties. So, you know, you don't have your local councillor living up the street for you and all the rest of it. So there's been a disfranchisement in this city. It's been going on for an awfully long time, but I think it's actually coming to a peak. The problem is, what happens if this is just base camp of Mount Everest? You know, there might be more to come, do you know what I mean? And I think unless there is radical pushback against this, there will be more to come.
Why do you think it's become so focused that it's these communities that are first for the chop in these situations? It seems to be a consistent type of policy making that now seems to be occurring within Edinburgh. And like you say, the vulgarity of seeing these grotesquely expensive infrastructure projects that are evidently underused, they're not being used, they often run into huge overspends. They would argue probably that those budgets come from different places, but it doesn't really matter, does it, at the end of the day? This
nonsense.
Yeah.
Imagine like decorating your house with really, really expensive wallpaper, but you have to switch the light off and can't feed your parents. I mean, what are they thinking? There seems to be, it's almost like we're going to end up in the Hunger Games, hopefully without the Hunger Games, but where we'll be in like Section 12 and they'll be in Pan Am. It's like, so I know it's about different budgets, but why can't we challenge that? Why can't we say, we don't want that to happen, we want this to happen? Why is it allowed to have these cycle paths everywhere? I cycle, well, not much now, but I used to cycle all the time, to be honest. But is cycle paths really as important as providing services to people who've got dementia or people in lock ends? What's that about?
There's certain eco-zealots in the town, especially those that are prevalent online. They would probably argue that they are more important. I mean, they're desperately keen for everybody to get out and walk and cycle more, but they're keen also to devastate. You know, if you look at Loch End, for example, which is the community centre there, I think where the Ripple project is. Loch End is a clearly disinvested area. The housing there, the housing stock is what I would consider to be in a state of managed decline. They're clearly got their eye on that to redevelop the whole area. They'll turf out whoever's left in council houses. I don't know whether they would put mandatory purchase orders on other houses, those that have been privately bought, but a lot of them won't be privately bought there. A lot of them will still be council houses. And I know that Live and Rent had done some campaigns there to raise some of the standard of investment in the council. there, but there's a clear policy on the part of Paul Lawrence and the council to completely ignore and ostracise further these communities that are on the fringes.
It's an agenda.
It's an agenda, but
it's not talked about. But it's agenda. We can see it.
It's in plain sight. It's in plain sight now. I think there's something that you use the term dystopian. I think it is the right term to use. I've been in the Lock-In Community Centre a few times recently. I've seen it. I've actually went in and there's a really nice vibe when you go in, and there's a good community vibe there. And but it's not somewhere that's rolling in cash. That's obvious,
No.
And you can tell from the people that are in there that it is really one of the last remaining places where people there is that sense of community in the places that the locals are able to go to. Why do you think there's such a contempt and an attack on these people? Is this it's fundamental? Would you say that class prejudice is just right there at the heart of this on some level, or is it less kind of ideological in that sense? You think it's just about these
class
people just don't.
Always exists.
Of course, it exists. But I mean, do you think that the decision making here comes from a place of actual genuine contempt, or just complete ignorance as to what actually occurs in these areas?
A bit from column A and a bit from column B. I think it's hard to see that the people who make these plans don't hate us. I'm sorry. It's like, they don't just hate you, Bob. Do you know what I mean? They
Who
hate
could
us.
possibly hate me?
Oh, well, they hate us. And when I mean us, they hate the people. And, I saw that really starkly years ago. I was involved in a campaign, Save Our Old Town, and we failed. And, that saw the demolition of council housing. It saw, the shutting down of the art project for homeless people. It saw the removal of the Bongo Club and Out of the Blue and all the rest of it. Mike's Roll Shop, part of everything that got attacked in the Colton Gate project was, I would say, we come from a community or a working class route. Everything went. And then they built it. And they built it, they put in a Park Hotel, and then they closed down the Canongate venture, and that became Brewdog Hotel. And now they've got a Pend. I don't know even why we needed a Pend, but we did need a Pend. And that was actually, council housing that they knocked down to take you to a square that takes you to the HMRC building. What they put in place of all that. Now, that did need some gentle loving care. It absolutely did. But what they did, they ponced themselves out to developers and to investors, and they get to decide, the developers and investors, they get to decide what happens, and that's exactly what happened. So now that's a really, it's not part, it doesn't feel part of our historic roots at all. There was nothing put in place. The wee cranny in Cranstonshire, wee community centre, they got that, but only because, remember, St Anne's Community Centre was closed down, which was publicly owned, Council One. We've just seen South Bridge getting closed down, given over for £1 to the Fringe Society. And the community centre in Dummy-Diggs and given it the university to the Charters. So it's all part of a plan. Now, at the time when I lived there, at that time I was just thinking my neighbourhood, my heritage, blah, blah, blah. But I actually think Save Our Old Town campaign was a canary in a cage. Yeah, and we died. And from that showed this, even when communities fight back, we will get what we want. And you have now seen what's happened in the city centre, in the old town of Edinburgh. The whole public realm is fixed. And every last bit of community has been closed down. Is
there not something to be said, though, that if we were actually to have some more effective way of polling residents of the city, and even those that participate in our kind of bankrupt and corrupted democratic process, I would take a guess that the vast majority of Edinburgh residents would not subscribe to the changes that have taken place in the city, nor would they be happy with the idea that the council were making these cuts. No. There seems to be a reliance on the apathy between the electorate and what goes on at a policy level. There's an arrogance, if you like. There's a complete supreme arrogance that seems to exist there, where just within the national political class, the same with the local government. I really don't think that if we were able to get a sense of what actual residents wanted and desired, that they would agree with what the council are doing. I don't think people in Edinburgh, even those who vote, whatever the party affiliation may or may not have traditionally been, I don't believe that they would be happy to see this level of attack upon essentially, like this article states, the most vulnerable in our communities.
I don't think people of Edinburgh would, but they need to join the dots. They need to actually see when they do that, that means this. And, perhaps a campaign to fight back will come. But they're talking about closing some of these projects down within 90 days. I'm going on Facebook and Twitter, and all these charities are saying, sorry, we're going to close down now. Sorry, we're going to close down. It's
a total outrage. It is. It's an absolute outrage. There's no two ways about it. And do you feel that? Do you feel a sense of hopelessness about this, or do you think that there is anything that they can do about it?
It's not the hope, isn't it? It's the despair that gets you. I'm always optimistic, and I'm always up for a fight back. But I think actually what you've seen over the years is activism has turned itself into almost the internet, click activism, clickbait stuff, like I'll sign a petition. And, I don't know about you, but I don't ever go to any political meetings.
No.
I'll maybe blether at you if I see you in the street or something like that. And I talk to my pals going, this is terrible and all that. But, I don't do any... I used to in the past, but I don't now. And I don't think that's that unusual. And so I think it is about consciousness. I think it's been done on purpose, but we just didn't see it coming, if that makes sense. So the challenge is to the people of Edinburgh, is this what you want your city to look like? To have wide, beautiful streets, with budgets that'll go over budget, but there will be no community resources. You won't have a people centre, you won't have a community centre. There'll be nothing for dementia. For people who've got dementia, there'll be nothing for young parents. No community. What is it you're wanting?
But at the same time, though, they'll find £50 million to terraform George Street and make it look like everywhere else.
That's horrible what they want to do to George Street. Like, who cares? Why does George Street need done up? I don't even know why it needs done up. It's not like you go walk along George Street and you go, oh no, look at George Street.
No,
nobody's ever done that.
No, absolutely. This is this crackpot Paul Lawrence and co who are determined to do these who have already responsible for so much vandalism in the city. Tell me, Friday morning there's a protest. Is that right? Can you tell me a bit about that?
There seems to be a protest that's popped up, spontaneously. 9 o'clock at the City Chambers. Lots of community groups and charities and third sector are asking people to go along, and I think people will go along to that.
Yeah, I think I'll try and...
Please come.
I've got a What the X on Friday morning, but I'll try and pop along at 9 first. Are you going to be there?
I'm going to be there at 9, but I've got another meeting I've got to go to, but I'll be there for even 15 minutes to show my face. And I think if everybody could show their face 5, 10, 15 minutes, that helps.
Right, well, that's what we want to do. We want to get as many people as possible to turn up at City Chambers on Friday morning just to show their solidarity if they weren't aware of it, or let people know about it, because I think this is the first of many attacks, though, that we're going to see. I don't think that this is the last that we're going to see, that this level of contempt being expressed towards our communities. I know the Craig and Tinney, the Craig Miller group as well, that they were expressing how devastating it's going to be. But it's the same all round, and it fundamentally, when I've looked at it and seen what it is, the word that springs to mind to me is it's just cruel. It seems like a very cruel attack.
Callous.
And especially when we're looking at how altered the city has been with these very elaborate and lavish infrastructure projects that, they don't do anything for if anything, they just wreck what the integrity of how the town was in the past, which is in itself questionable. I think they're going to look back at this period and shake their heads almost like the sort of beaching cuts kind of level of like destruction of an existing way of life and a way that things were. I think that what's being done to Edinburgh over this period, especially over this last decade, is outrageous. It's completely outrageous. And this is an attack on our communities. Catriona, thank you so much.
Thanks,
for
Bob,
joining
for
me.
asking me to come in. I've got to go soon, so but thanks
My
for
intention of
being
having guests was going to be a little bit more considered and organised, but I think just under the circumstances, I wanted to just try and get a wee chat about this because it really is a major issue for the town, and we're trying our best to get the message out there via what the X and what have you. Right, all.
No bother.
Catch you soon. Cheers, Catriona.
All right then. See you later,
Thank
Bob.
you.
Bye.
Cheers.